All right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to the AutoCAD versus AutoCAD LT webinar. My name is Kayla Tenadori-Ocardi and I'm the host today. I'm joined by presenter Sean Bryant, who will introduce himself shortly. Before we begin, we have a few things to note. First, our safe harbor statement. The presentation today is made based on our current expectations. Things can change. Purchasing decisions should not be made based upon reliance on these statements.
Obviously, my name's Sean Bryant, and some of you may know me. Some of you might be thinking, who is this guy? I'm the owner and lead consultant of CAD-FM Consultants based over in the UK. And I'm also the owner of the blog, Not Just CAD, which you may or may not have seen out there on the internet as well. I'm also a writer. I've written for various publications, AutoCAD, Catalyst, Redshift, just to name a few. And you may recognize my voice if you look at AutoCAD videos on LinkedIn Learning, which was previously lynda.com. I have a surreal experience at places like Autodesk University where people come up to me and they say that they recognize my voice, which is kind of freaky, but they do obviously through the video content that I provide. I've been working with AutoCAD and Revit as a consultant and trainer for many years. I'm also part of the Autodesk Expert Elite program. And I provide a bit of subject matter expertise to Certiport and AMD as well. And I've been mentoring a lot of the speakers, the first-time speakers at AU for AU 2020 this year, which is a virtual event. So it's a little bit surreal this year. No face-to-face event in Vegas, for example. And also I've been working with AutoCAD now for over 32 years, which probably does show my age a little bit. And I've been working with Revit for just over 11 years as well. And the therapy to get away from that is singing and songwriting. I've got some music out there on iTunes and various other outlets, and the second album is under construction. It's taken a bit of time, but hey, I've got other things to do like AutoCAD webinars right now. And I've been known to sound like the Geico Gecko. So those of you over in the USA, you'll probably smile at that one next time you see the gecko in one of the Geico adverts on the TV. And I've also been known to be Ricky Gervais's stunt double in my spare time as well. So let's jump into the presentation now. The key concepts that we're looking at are AutoCAD, the full AutoCAD versus AutoCAD LT. And what you can see on the screen at the moment is a visual comparison as to what you can do with full AutoCAD as against AutoCAD LT. You can see that in the full AutoCAD, we can do 2D, 3D. We've also got the application programming interface in there. We've got parametric constraints, data extraction, and CAD standards. Now, none of those, apart from the 2D, are available in LT, and that's what we're going to discuss today. We're going to see how, from a productivity and a time and motion kind of environment, how AutoCAD stacks up against AutoCAD LT. So moving forward now into a really good visual slide, you basically get an 86% overall productivity gain. Now there is a little asterisk next to that, and there's a little disclaimer at the bottom, basically saying that the study was designed by Autodesk and commissioned to an outside consultant. So your results may differ. You may not get exactly 86%. But just to give you an idea, that means that when you're working in full AutoCAD and you're doing 14 hours work, that's pretty much the equivalent of 100 hours work in LT, or vice versa. If you're working in LT and you do 100 hours of work, you could do that in 14 hours, hence the 86% productivity gain. Now, what this means is an AutoCAD designer can generate designs up to 7.1 times quicker as compared to AutoCAD LT. That's a pretty cool statistic when you think about it. And there is a productivity study available from Autodesk. It's called The Benefits of Using AutoCAD versus AutoCAD LT, which is the basis of the presentation today. And we're going to go through that in a little bit more detail. So let's have a look at what the productivity study actually covered, the time savings. And again, a couple of little asterisks there at the top, little disclaimer, just to say that obviously every effort has been made to make sure that these tests are as fair and objective as possible. Your results might differ to the percentages that I'm quoting here on the screen. So parametric constraints in full AutoCAD, there's a complete geometric and dimensional constraint creation, editing and management suite in full AutoCAD. And it gives you roughly time savings of 33%. When you're creating plans and elevations, if you're working in full AutoCAD, you can save about 46% because you can manipulate 3D solids when you're 3D modeling to give you those plans and elevation views rather than having to create them from scratch in 2D and LT. Isometric drafting is another fantastic tool available to you in both AutoCAD and LT. But again, if you create 3D objects, the isometric representations are a couple of clicks. Whereas in AutoCAD LT, you've got to use 2D modeling and isodraft. So AutoCAD can view these 3D objects in the isometric views almost immediately using the view cube. And I'll go into that in more detail later. But again, look at the time saving. It's 61%. It's a big time saving. Data extraction, one of my favorites with full AutoCAD. A time saving of 93%. We've all been there counting all the objects in a drawing. The data extraction command in full AutoCAD that's not available in AutoCAD LT, it interrogates the drawing, providing block, attribute data, and various other pieces of data that can then be taken out of the drawing and perhaps put into an Excel spreadsheet or a database. You can even add an AutoCAD table. CAD standards, again, another big time saver there, 81%. The CAD standards functionality is another one of my favorites, having been a CAD manager in the past, and it gives you the ability to save to a DWS file format that you can then compare against your DWG files. And text editing in the Express tools. Express tools are a lovely feature of the full AutoCAD, and again, a big time saving there over AutoCAD LT. Some of the text editing tools I'm going to show you will make your life much, much easier if you're using them in the Express tools in full AutoCAD. And the little disclaimer, like I said at the bottom, just basically says that those percentages might not be exactly what you get if you are going to the full AutoCAD from AutoCAD LT. So let's move into the first one. We're going to have a little look now at parametric constraints. Now, you've got geometric, which is your geometry, and dimensional constraints in full AutoCAD with a time saving of about 33%. So what that means is you can assess the geometric and dimensional constraints using the show and hide functions. So they're not there all the time. You can switch them on and off like you can your layers, and you can edit and delete those constraints where applicable to allow the design to meet any changes in the specification. Now, as I said in that last bullet point at the bottom there, there's no constraint creation in AutoCAD LT, but they can be edited and deleted in AutoCAD LT, which can sometimes put the cat among the pigeons, because you might delete a constraint in LT, it goes back into full AutoCAD in a DWG file, and that constraint isn't there anymore. So you have to put controls and procedures in place, especially if you've got a combination of full AutoCAD and AutoCAD LT as your platform for drafting in your CAD function within your organization. What I'm going to do now is jump into a really simple little video, and it's going to take us through a simple little bracket drawing. You can see that there at the top of the AutoCAD screen there, it's bracket.dwg. I'm just going to run the video now, and as we go through it, I'll explain what's going on in AutoCAD. So we've got the parametric tab in full AutoCAD, and what I'm doing now is hitting show all for geometric and dimensional constraints, of which there aren't any at the moment. And then what we're going to do, we're going to jump through all of the settings. So you can see there that that's our geometric constraints for our geometry. And then if I hit the arrow there on the panel, you can see that you can put names and expressions in for your dimensional constraints, for example. And then auto constrain, fantastic function in full AutoCAD. It applies constraints to all of the geometry for you automatically. So what I can do here is select everything, just use a crossing window there, press enter, and there's my auto constraints. They've all appeared, and AutoCAD has created those for me. I can then start thinking about concentric constraints like that, making sure the hole in the bracket is concentric with that arc at the top. And then I'll make sure that we've got some coincident points to join up that gap. So those points now are always coincident together. And then we'll start working on some of the line work there, making sure those lines are parallel to each other. And then we don't want a wonky corner there, top left, so we're going to make sure that that's perpendicular as well. So all of those constraints will hold that bracket together now. And that's our geometry in place. So now we want to think about dimensions of our bracket. So I'm picking those 2 points there and applying an aligned dimensional parameter there, and I'm going to put an expression in saying D1 equals 25. So that now becomes the D1 constraint, which is 25 units long and it's locked. I can then consider something like a linear, horizontal, or vertical constraint. I can go linear here because I know that this is already perpendicular to the lines. Remember, we put that geometric constraint in. And that's going to become D2, but I'm going to say that D2 equals D1 plus 5. So I'm adding those expressions and tying everything down to pull the bracket together. So what I've got now is some functions, some formulas. I can manage those in the parameters manager, like so I can change that value, for example, and say it's +3. As soon as I do that, it updates in the drawing, and the parameters manager will allow me to manage all of those parameters and the constraints and the expressions. Now, obviously that looks a little bit on the messy side, so I can hide all of my constraints like so, and it just looks like a normal AutoCAD drawing now. But what you've got to bear in mind there is you need to interrogate the drawing and switch them back on by using show all if you want to edit and make any changes. You can also delete constraints if you don't need them anymore. You can delete all of them if you want to. I don't recommend it if you want to constrain the drawing, but you get the idea there. So you can see how quick and easy it is just in those few moments how to constrain that little bracket drawing both with geometric and dimensional constraints. It's a massive time saver, and it means now that that is a parametric bracket and you don't have to go in and edit everything individually. You can just edit the constraints instead, and the bracket will obviously update accordingly. Into the second part now of what the productivity study kind of gave us, and that was the plans and elevations. Now, what I want you to do here is have a look at the AutoCAD and AutoCAD LT shots that I've got there in the slide. Because what we're looking to do is create a plan view of our wall and an elevation view of our wall, but also display the window position in the plan view and in the elevation view. So in AutoCAD LT, I would have to develop all of that. I'd either have to draw the plan view first and then put the dashed gray construction lines in, and using object snap tracking, draw in the window position and the wall position. Now, if you go over to the AutoCAD graphic there on the left, you can see the LT graphic in an isometric plane there on the left-hand side of the graphic, but you can also see a 3D representation of the wall and the window. What you've got there is if you're in 3D, you've got the ability, and this is where the time savings of 46% come in, you've got the ability just to flick through the preset views in 3D to get a top view, a side view, which in essence would be an elevation view. So let me just explain that by way of a video. And as they say, a picture paints 1,000 words, or in this case, a video. So we'll jump across. And as you can see there, I've got all the construction lines in place on the left. Imagine that that is AutoCAD LT on the left, which kind of goes against the slide, but it's just the way it is in the drawing. And the little one on the right, the little plan view on the right, is actually a 3D representation of the wall, but we're looking at it in the top view in the view cube. So let's run the video. And what we'll do now is we'll place our wall and our window in our 2D representation. So I'm just going to utilize the rectangle command on the draw panel, and good old object snaps. I can pick that corner there, and I'm on the walls layer, so I don't need to worry about the color or line type, etc. So there's my wall representation. I'll jump into the windows layer now, and what I'll utilize now is a little bit of polar tracking and object snap tracking, which I'm sure you've all utilized before. So I'll hover over that corner there, come up to the intersection with the construction line, and again hover over the other corner in the plan view and come up to the other construction line. There's the intersection, and there's my window representation in 2D. So that's all flat, and I've had to draft all of that manually. Now here's the trick. What I can do now is a little 3D orbit there. My wall and my window are already there in 3D. So I've already got a top view, front view, side view, etc. all in place already. They're just dumb 3D solids to represent a wall and a window at the moment. I can go into a lot more detail later in the 3D modeling. And then if I jump into the conceptual visual style as well, one of the benefits you have there as well is you can apply colors and materials in 3D to give you a much more realistic view of your wall and your window. And the trick there is that you've got that fantastic view cube. And the view cube just saves so much time. I can look at the front view, there's my elevation. And what I can do there is jump to the top view, and there's my plan view there as well. Saves me having to draft everything individually. Those views are already there because I've already got the 3D solids that represent that wall and that window. So that's where, in an overall perspective, you're getting that time saving of around 46%. So you can see there in full AutoCAD, if you're working in 3D as against 2D in AutoCAD LT, it gives you an automatic time saving because you can start developing things using 3D solids and utilizing the preset views in things like the AutoCAD View Cube as well. Moving along now, we're going to have a look at isometric drafting. Now, this kind of relates to the previous video a little bit. And what we're going to look at is an isometric view using the X, Y, and Z axes in their isometric positions. Now, the time saving here is 61%. Now, again, you might not get 61%. You might get more even, depending on what you're doing at the time. Now, the object shown in the drawing is a simple rectangular base with a circular hole through the center. And again, we've got an AutoCAD view and we've got an AutoCAD LT view. Now, the AutoCAD LT view is purely 2D draftsmanship. So what we've done there is we've utilized what is called the ISO draft setting on the status bar, and we've drafted all of those lines at the 30, 60 degrees angles to get an isometric view of a base, and an ellipse there in the center of that top face. Even though it isn't a top face, it's a 2D representation of a top face, gives you what looks like an isometric view of a solid base with a hole through the middle. The AutoCAD view on the left-hand part of the slide there is actually a 3D solid with a 3D hole through the middle. So again, it's that 3D versus 2D argument again with the AutoCAD and the AutoCAD LT. And what it means is you can generate the rectangular base in an isometric view. You can do that using IsoDraft in 2D, but if you do it in 3D, again, you've got those preset views on the View Cube in full AutoCAD that you can utilize. And more importantly, the hidden lines can be hidden using various visual styles if need be as well. So let's jump into another video and I'll take you through this again, very briefly, on how you can get those time savings of 61%. So you can see there on the left, that is purely 2D drafting. There's a hatch pattern and there's some lines representing what looks like a rectangular base with a hole in it, and that's the ellipse that I mentioned. Now, if I start looking at IsoDraft there and switching on the status bar, can you see I'm changing the positions of the lines, the axes on the cursor, and that basically kind of works in an orthogonal kind of setting, because what it does is it ties you down to drawing lines at those angles in the IsoDraft to allow you to create that 2D representation of that isometric view of the base. Now, if I jump over to the View Cube, you'll see now we've got a 2D wireframe view of our solid base. If I go to conceptual, you can see that that is a solid, and if I look at the top, I'm looking straight through it. There's a hole through that solid. And just like in the previous video, can you see we can jump around and pick any view we want on the View Cube to look at our little rectangular base with the hole in it. But the funny thing is, and this is the thing that always throws me when you're creating 2D isometric representations, as soon as I go to an isometric view with the View Cube of the 3D solid, you can see that the 2D AutoCAD LT representation goes all wonky and skewed. That's because it's purely a flat 2D representation of an isometric view. And that's where you're getting the time savings. If you start generating things in 3D, in full AutoCAD, you've got those preset views in 3D already set up for you. So you've got top, left, right, front, back, bottom, etc. And that makes your life so much easier because you can set up different viewports to look at those different 3D views as well. So what you've got there is a tool that allows you to give a view on every single face of that 3D base with the hole through it, whereas I'd have to draw a lot of different isometric views using the IsoDraft in 2D in AutoCAD LT. So you can see there another time saving based on working in 3D as opposed to 2D. We're now going to look at one of my favorites. Now, data extraction is a fantastic tool. I loved this as a CAD manager. One of the things I work with, the name of my company is CAD FM Consultants, and I worked in a lot of facilities management environments with AutoCAD and with a lot of sort of computer-aided facilities management tools and things. And one of the things that we always had to do was suck blocks and attributes out of drawings and put them into a tabular format. So what we've got here is we're going to count the instances of the block attributes in the workstation block. So that's where Fred Smith, employee 124, is sitting at desk 100 in the slide there on the screen. And what we're going to do is we're going to list the specific information we need from each of those blocks, i.e. the block attributes. We're also going to count the instances of the nested blocks in the workstation block. You'll notice in the table on the slide at the bottom left there, we've got 6 filing cabinets, 6 executive chairs, and 6 executive desks. Those are the nested blocks that are then converted into one block, the workstation block, which has those attributes against it, the Fred Smith, the employee 124, and the desk 100. And all of that information can be taken out of your drawing and put into, as you can see there, an AutoCAD table, or it can go externally. It can go to something like an Excel spreadsheet or an Access database in an MDB file, for example. So what we'll do, another little video for you, and as you can see, we're in AutoCAD and we've got 6 of those workstation blocks all set up. And when I run the video, if we just hover over some of those, you'll see that they are a block with the attributes. So there's Michael Jones there, we've got Edwina as well, and all of these employees have their own desk, and obviously it's a block with attributes. So what I've done, I've just jumped into the tables layer, and I'm going to go to the Insert tab now, and I'm going to run the Extract Data command in the Linking and Extraction panel. And this is fantastic because it takes you through an 8-step wizard. And all you've got to do is literally follow the steps, step by step, setting the settings in each particular page. So what I'm doing here is I'm saving my DXE file, my data extraction file, because then it'll remember all of the settings that I've set up in the wizard, and I can go back to it and open it up again. I'm overwriting the one I created before the presentation to test it. So you can see there that we're using our current drawing, and I can go in there, I can add additional settings. I can also add other folders and other drawings to extract data from. It doesn't have to be one individual drawing, for example. I can also select, as you can see there, individual objects. Now, when I jump to the next step, you can see now that I've got various options available and the display options are at the bottom. So what I'm doing is I'm just setting up my display options to show what I want to see, my objects, my display names, the type of objects, and so on. And now you'll notice that it brings up everything, every single piece of information. Now I can switch those off individually if I want to, or I can utilize my category filters. So 3D visualization, we don't need that. And we don't need the general, we don't need the geometry, the miscellaneous, or the text. All we need are the attributes. So I just leave attribute ticked, and there's 3 properties that I'm going to extract. I click on next, and now I get a visual tabular representation of the information that I'm going to get. Now, again, I can mess around with the settings. I can link to external data here if I want to. I can sort my columns, and I can move the count column to the right, for example. And as you can see, that then moves that to the right, and then my desk number, I'll maybe place that over to the left. So I can move the columns around. So this is basically me tweaking what's going to come out of the drawing. So I can insert the data extraction table into the drawing, and the output data can go to an external file if I want to. I'm not going to worry about that in this case, and all I'm going to do is drop a table now into my AutoCAD drawing. Just using the standard table style, I haven't got any other ones set up. I'll give the table a title, so I'll just pop some text in there saying workstations, and I can change the title, header, and data cell styles if I want to, and I click on next. Now it's finished to complete the extraction. I click on finish. Now my table's a little bit small, but I'll drop it into the drawing anyway. I'll zoom in on it, and there's all my information there. So you can see it all there already, but I'm just going to make it a bit bigger so that we can see what's going on. So I'll just scale that up, just pick a base point, and we'll give that a largish scale factor of, say, 20. Now when I zoom out, that table will be bigger, and I can read all the information, and it relates to the workstation blocks that we've got in the drawing itself. So you can see how quick and easy that is. That was really fast. Now, obviously, I've only done 6 blocks there with attributes, but imagine if you've got 500 desks on a big office floor in a big corporate building. That's going to save you so much time. That's why you've got that massive time saving of 93%. That data extraction tool, when you're using blocks and attributes, is fantastic. It's really quick. And it's one of the things that always makes me vouch for full AutoCAD as against AutoCAD LT. Another one that I used a lot, especially when I was a CAD manager, was the CAD standards functionality in full AutoCAD. So you've got the ability to check layers, text, dimensions, and various other things against what they call a preset CAD standard. That's your DWS file. And again, big time saving here, 81%. Because if you didn't have this and you were using AutoCAD LT, this would have to be checked manually. So you'd have to go into the DWG file and literally check the properties of all the objects. What the DWS file does in the CAD standards is it checks all of that for you using that little dialog box you can see there in the slide on the right-hand side. So what you do is you locate the CAD standard, the DWS file, and you then link it to the DWG file that you're working with. You check and adjust any perhaps third-party drawings, and the DWG file is then adhering to the appropriate standard moving forward. I used this one hell of a lot when I was working with third-party drawings coming into my company, and I needed to make sure that all the drawings adhered to my standards so that then everything worked with the project and worked accordingly. So again, I've got another little video for you, and we'll jump into the video. So there's our little third-party drawing. It's a little project drawing.dwg file. The dimensions themselves are great. They communicate your design intent quite happily, and you've got your different line types and different colors for center lines, the outline, and you've got some hidden detail there on the little circle in the center. So if I now go to the Manage tab and go to the CAD Standards panel, I can configure my CAD standard setup. So what I'm going to look for now is my DWS file. So I click on the plus sign, and there's my CAD standard 001.dws. Now you create that from a blank drawing with all the settings that you need and save it as a DWS file. That's now been associated with the project drawing.dwg file. And what I can do now is start checking my standards. So I go up to check, and there's the dialog box I mentioned. So the idea now is I just work through each of these problems that pops up. So you can see there's the dim style there that's non-standard. And I can say, okay, I want to apply that to say that particular replace with regular dims anno, or I can mark it as ignored. So it jumps to the next problem. And then what I can do is click on next, like so, and it always gives me the option to jump to the next problem. And all I do now is I go through and select what I need to change. So you can see that the layer outline is going to the layer objects, for example. The layer text annotation, I go and replace it with one of the layers, which in this case is text in the DWS file. And every time I hit fix, it's actually updating those in the DWG file. So what it's doing is it's swapping out using the information in the DWS file and updating the third-party drawing as we go. Now, there's a lot of information here, and all I'm doing is I'm hitting fix and next, fix and next. And it can be a laborious task, but the one thing I will say here, if you look at the time saving, it's much quicker to do it this way, and then you know your drawings are adhering to a known standard. They're adhering to your standard rather than, say, a third-party standard. And then when the drawings go out of the door at 5 o'clock on a Friday night, you know that they adhere to your standard and there's no errors or problems there. So as you can see, we're working through there. We've got some text styles, and you see the fonts change, things like that. And as you work through, you'll start to see that the fonts change in the DWG file as well. And it's really important. So if I go into regular Anno Calibri there and hit fix, and then hit next and move to the next problem, each time I do this, all I've got to do is fix it. So you can see there, the standards check now is complete. We found 12 problems and I ignored one, remember? So when I click on close, it says choose next to check this drawing, and there's the one that I chose to ignore. So what I'll do is I'll fix it this time. I'll switch off the ignore tick box, click on next, and what you'll find this time is there won't be any more problems. So I'll make sure that we've got the appropriate dim style and fix it, and you can see there that the problem has now been fixed manually, and I can close that, no more problems, close the dialog box, and my drawing has now been updated to my standard that I had in the DWS file. And you can see that in the drawing itself, you can see the color there has changed on the center lines. You can see the font has changed on the dimensions, little things like that. And it's little things like that that take up all that time when you're working in AutoCAD LT. The trick here in full AutoCAD, create the DWS file and check all the drawings against it. Saves a lot of time, 81%. Moving along now, we're going to have a little look at the text editing in the Express tools. Now, I love the Express tools. I'm a big fan of the Express tools in AutoCAD because there's some really wacky and diverse functionality in there. One of the ones I love is putting text along a curve, for example, which you can't do in LT because you haven't got the Express tools. But we're going to look in this case at converting some single line text to multi-line text, changing the text from all uppercase to what I call mixed case or sentence case. We're going to enclose the text in an AutoCAD object, a rectangle, and then that allows for quick and easy text editing to communicate your design intent because it's all multi-line text, and multi-line text allows you to work almost like a word processor. But again, time savings. Look at the time savings you get in the slide in this case, 80%. And you'll see why when we jump into the video in a moment. And if you look, we're changing the text from the before option there in the slide to the after option there in the slide. And you can see the difference. But if I jump into the video, it's again, a video paints 1,000 words, as I say. So if I jump into this one, you can see there's our text there in our drawing. If I hover over that, you can see what we've got there is each line of the text is a piece of single line text. And I want that to be multi-line text. So I'm going to go up to my Express Tools tab on my ribbon. And you can see there's some really cool functionality in here. And a lot of this has been written by third-party developers. I'm going to hop over to the text panel in the middle there. There you go, there's text, and I want to convert to mText. And all I've got to do here is select the text I want to convert. So I just select all of them. Each one, just a little click on each bit of text and press enter. That's it. And you'll notice, can you see how that changes? You'll notice that obviously it changes based on the multi-line text, and a bit of text even drops down. That's all one piece of text now. And I can select that, and because it's multi-line text, it's all one object. And now I press enter, and I want that to be sentence case instead of caps. Click OK, and as you can see, it all updates. It's not so shouty now. I find notes in capitals very shouty. So what I'm going to do there, just make sure that the notes is in capitals, because that does need to be in caps. And as you can see, it just looks that little bit more professional on your drawing. So we've done that, and now we want to enclose this in an object to highlight the notes on the drawing. So I can select the text, and the offset factor there, I'll just put a value in, fairly random number there. Let's go for 0.5, which is basically, in essence, half the height of the text. And we'll enclose that with a rectangle. And do we want that to be constant or variable? Well, it's multi-line text, so we should go variable, because then when we make the multi-line text bigger, the rectangle will stretch with it. But can you see how that looks totally different to the text that we originally had? The benefit you've also got there now is it's multi-line text. It's all one object, so it's quick and easy to edit. And you've got the rectangle around it now, which also highlights your notes on your drawing as well. So again, you can see there, time savings. I don't have to think about the spacing of that rectangle around my text, because what happens there is the enclosing object in the Express tools allows me to do that and specify a factor, and it can also be variable, so that when I do stretch my multi-line text notes, the rectangle stretches with the text. Again, time savings there of 80%, and you can see why. It's very quick and easy to utilize those text Express tools in the Express tools tab. I haven't actually got a video for the next one, but I do want to talk you through it because it's really important. Full AutoCAD offers what they call an application programming interface, an API. Now, some of you might already be programming in AutoCAD. You might have some macros, some routines that you've created, perhaps using Visual Basic or Visual Lisp. And there's an applications panel there, you can see it on the slide top right, where you can load up the application and then run the script, for example, if you want to run the script within AutoCAD itself. And what you're doing there is you're utilizing user programming through the API to automate some of those tedious, time-consuming tasks. So, for example, RevCloud is a really good one. That was developed using the API. It originally was an Express tool, and it's now come into the actual AutoCAD ribbon. It's not in the Express Tools tab anymore. It's actually coming off of the Draw panel on the Home tab on the ribbon. And that user programming is allowing people to develop apps that will benefit AutoCAD users in your team. And you can jump onto the Autodesk App Store. You can see that on the slide there as well. And it's very easy to find. You just type in Autodesk App Store in your browser and you'll get that screen. And you can find various apps available for you in the App Store. Now, those time-saving apps provided are created by third-party developers, and they're using the API, but they're in essence selling their wares. So if you've got a macro, a routine, an app that you've developed, there's nothing to stop you becoming a developer and putting that onto the App Store as well. So again, another time saver. I haven't got any statistics for this one because it's pretty variable, as you can see. But one of the ones that I love there, you can just see it in the featured apps in the Autodesk App Store, is the trim split. That's a great one when you're working in 3D modeling because I can trim split objects one from the other. And you can see there that they're taking the little cylinder 3D object out of that rectangular 3D object. So there's some great tools in the App Store, but don't forget as well, you can also create your own macros, apps, routines, etc. using the API. So let's have a look at the numbers. How does this all work? How do the overall time savings work with full AutoCAD versus AutoCAD LT? So in the productivity study, there's a table, and I've tried to replicate it as close as I can in the slide. So the drafting tasks that we went through in the productivity study were parametric constraints, plans and elevations, isometric drafting, data extraction, CAD standards, and the text editing using the Express tools. And then what we did was we logged the time against each of them in minutes and seconds. And there's the time savings, which is the ones that you've seen on the slides and on the videos so far. So to give you a rough idea, performing those 6 tasks in AutoCAD LT, roughly speaking, obviously with disclaimers, is 5 hours, 44 minutes. If you did that in AutoCAD, it takes 48.5 minutes, and that's that 86% time saving that we talked about earlier. So the overall time saving with AutoCAD, 86%, which means you've got a productivity improvement with AutoCAD. You're doing everything 7.1 times quicker. So there's your time saving and your productivity improvement. It's kind of self-explanatory when you think about it. However, the one thing I will say here is I'm not going to knock AutoCAD LT. If you just want to do 2D drafting, it's a fantastic tool. I cut my teeth in AutoCAD on AutoCAD LT many years ago. I used it for many hours, and it's a great product. However, as I began to become a more versatile AutoCAD user, full AutoCAD, the functionality in full AutoCAD, especially things like CAD standards, data extraction, became more imperative to me. So full AutoCAD became what I wanted to use. Now, one of the things that you will find now is if you sign up for an AutoCAD subscription, you don't just get AutoCAD. You also gain access to industry-specific tool sets. So you don't just get AutoCAD, you get these 7 specialized tool sets as well. So you get architecture, electrical, mechanical, MEP, map 3D, raster design, and plant 3D as well. So you can work within various industries. One of the ones that I often use is the electrical one. And it's a totally different workflow to regular AutoCAD, but it's a different workflow because it has to be, because you're working in an electrical environment rather than just a vanilla sort of 2D or 3D drafting environment in full AutoCAD. Those specialized tool sets, the key benefits with obviously full AutoCAD in this case, you wouldn't get the tool sets with LT, is that you've got the access to loads of libraries of symbols, parts, detail components. I mentioned the electrical tool set. That's full of symbol libraries for all of the different electrical components you put in electrical drawings and instrumentation drawings. It also allows you to be faster. You've got creation of annotations, layers, and properties, and it's automated in some of the tool sets. However, it's familiar. It's the AutoCAD interface. It's the good old AutoCAD engine that you're driving, just with an industry focus in the tool set. It's also efficient. You can extend these workflows across your disciplines more effectively, because it may be that you're working in, let's say, the electrical environment. You can create your drawings in AutoCAD Electrical, the electrical tool set. They can then be shipped out as regular drawings if need be, but you've got that industry specific discipline information in the drawing if you need it as well. Now the subscription benefits are, and these are for AutoCAD and LT, I hasten to add, when you do go onto your AutoCAD subscription, technical support, up-to-date software, flexible term lengths, and administrative tools. These are all available. The flexible term lengths is a really good one because you can sign up for a specific period of time. You're not there all the time. So you might have a big project on the go where you're bringing in, say, 50 CAD draftspeople that are through an agency because you need that workforce at the time. So you subscribe for a particular term length, and then once you're done, you can then say to Autodesk, I don't need those anymore. Can you take those off my subscription? And obviously, from a monetary perspective, you're saving money there, and you can be really flexible and very agile with your workforce. As the workforce gets bigger, you sign up to more licenses. As the workforce gets smaller, you bring that license count down. And the admin tools allow you to do that quickly and easily. Obviously, up-to-date software, if you're on subscription, you're always going to be having access to the latest features and versions, but also you can go back to older versions if you need to. And you've always got the good old Autodesk technical support there as well. Another thing that you get with subscription, and this is with AutoCAD and AutoCAD LT, is not only do you get the desktop app, you get the web app and the mobile app as well. So you can literally take AutoCAD anywhere. So you can see there, it's on your desktop monitor, laptop, phone, tablet. You can run it on any of those devices and take your drawings with you. So you literally, as it says on the slide, you can work anytime and anywhere. You've got that continuous connectivity. Now, what I love is basically it means you can take your work on the road with you. I can remember back in the day, I was using house bricks to hold drawings onto the hood of my car so they didn't blow away when I was working on site with the guys on site. Don't need to do that anymore. I can walk around with a laptop, a tablet, even a phone if I want to, and I've got access to my drawings. You've got extended workflows there. I can be working on, say, an iPad Pro using either AutoCAD Web or the mobile app, and I've got that extended workflow. I can view, edit, annotate on any device, desktop, web, and mobile. But the benefit is it's all AutoCAD. You've still got that core AutoCAD engine, that core AutoCAD ethos, regardless of which device or which app you're using. I'd like to thank you for your time today. And just before I hand back to Kayla and obviously the Q&A for this particular presentation and so on, I'd just like to say to all of you, please, please, please be safe. The world is very different out there right now. And more importantly, be kind to everybody because you just don't know what people are going through at the moment. There's a lot of stuff going on and we're all having to think a lot more about what we're doing and what we're doing on our day-to-day and so on. So be safe and be kind. I'll hand it back to you now, Kayla.
Thank you, Sean. Great presentation. So Sean, we had a question that came in earlier during the presentation about the AutoCAD, mechanical, AutoCAD electrical, and having the differences between the tool sets basically and the full version of AutoCAD as well as the LT version of AutoCAD.
Okay, basically, well, one of the things that you'll have to do, if you want to use the specialized tool sets, it has to be full AutoCAD. You have to subscribe to full AutoCAD. It's often known as the one AutoCAD subscription with 7 specialized tool sets. Now, one of the benefits you have there, like I said, you've got all the industry focused technology for each of the individual tool sets. You can easily get those drawings out of something like, say, the mechanical tool set and put them into LT, but you won't get that tool set functionality in LT. LT is a straight 2D drafting and design tool, and that's exactly what it's there for. And from a cost perspective, if that's all you need to do, it's obviously lower cost than, say, the full AutoCAD. But if you want to use the tool set, you're going to have to go for a full AutoCAD subscription. It's actually called one AutoCAD with 7 specialized tool sets at the moment, which is often difficult to say, especially when you're presenting at AU. But one of the things is that you get all that extra functionality, like I mentioned in the slides.
Terrific. And just someone had a follow-up question about when is it appropriate to have someone in AutoCAD LT versus full AutoCAD? I feel like you touched on a little bit earlier, but if you could, I guess, give a little bit more detail on, as a CAD manager, when you would choose to have someone on LT versus AutoCAD.
Yeah, I mean, to give you an example of when I was a CAD manager, I had roughly at any given time a minimum of 25 CAD people working for me in the CAD function where I was working. And one of the things we did was we normally had, we actually called them within our company CAD champions. And our CAD champions were the guys that were, and girls, I hasten to add, just to be politically correct, they were the ones on the full AutoCAD, working with things like the blocks with attributes, the data extraction, the DWS files for CAD standards, and so on. And then you had what I call the regular drafting kind of staff, and all they were doing was editing drawings. So literally we could output the DWGs from the CAD champions, and all the difficult stuff, the data extraction and so on, was done by them because they were more advanced, more experienced. And then the guys who were just drafting, doing the 2D drafting, they were just using AutoCAD LT. And the cross section back then, when I was a CAD manager, I think we had 5 full AutoCADs and 20 AutoCAD LTs. So you can see there from a cost implication how that can save you money if you know that you're only going to need to do the 2D drafting with LT. Obviously, there were times when we needed more of the full AutoCAD because we needed to adopt the functionality in the full AutoCAD. So we're talking data extraction again, standards and so on. But it varied. But it didn't vary that much back then because obviously this is quite a few years ago. But nowadays with subscription, it's so much easier to maintain those licenses because it's all flexible. So I could be running 5 full AutoCADs and 20 LTs, and then the next month I might need 10 full AutoCADs and 35 AutoCAD LTs, and I can just add that to my subscription using the flexible licensing tools that subscription gives me.
Great, thank you, Sean. We had a question, someone asked about, they asked with AutoCAD LT mobile app, and just to clarify, the mobile app is the same for AutoCAD and AutoCAD LT, but I guess if you could provide a little bit more detail about the use case for the mobile app for this user.
Yeah, sure. One of the things I will say is I didn't actually mention it during the presentation, but I do have another AU class if you want to watch it in November, which is all about using AutoCAD on mobile devices. So I talk about the AutoCAD web app, I talk about the AutoCAD mobile app. Now that comes with both subscriptions. It comes with full AutoCAD and AutoCAD LT. And the web app is literally AutoCAD in a browser. That's the best way to describe it. And the technology there, again, you've got a very similar interface when you're drafting, things like your crossing selections, your window selections, your right-click functionality, your object snaps, everything's the same. The only difference in the web app is it uses the simplex font when you place text, and that's to provide an optimum functionality within a browser, because if you had all those different fonts to think about, the browser has to think about that and it would slow the AutoCAD web app down. But it's a great piece of functionality. You might go onto a client site and you know that you've got a drawing that you want to show the client, and instead of getting all your laptop out and waiting for AutoCAD, the desktop app, to boot up, you can just say to the client, can I just jump on your machine and go into your browser? And you go to web.autocad.com, sign in using your Autodesk account. You've already uploaded the drawings to, say, AutoCAD Web and Mobile or Dropbox or whichever provider you might want to use the web app with. You can open up your drawing within seconds, and you can even edit it if you want to while you're there in front of the client, and it will save back to that cloud-based version of your drawing. It's the same in the mobile app as well. The mobile app is for smaller devices, so we're talking things like iPads, iPhones. If you want to use the web app, I always say go iPad Pro upwards kind of idea. But I've used the mobile app on my phone in my AU classes, and I've made a change on my phone, and it updates on the big screen in my AU class. And it's phenomenal technology, because what it's doing is it's giving you that connectivity to your designs, but while you're mobile, and utilizing all of that mobile technology that we have. So rather than sitting there looking at the latest version of Vanity Fair on your phone, you could be looking at AutoCAD instead and editing your drawings with a client on site. even on a device as small as an iPhone. So the technology is fantastic. And if you subscribe to either AutoCAD or AutoCAD LT, you get that technology to use.
Great, thank you, Sean. I think you did pique someone's interest a little bit there when you mentioned using AutoCAD on an iPad Pro, and so they're curious a bit more about that user experience for you.
Yeah, well, I'm a big Apple fan anyway. All of my tech is Apple. I use a MacBook Pro to run Windows, would you believe it? But yeah, the technology is excellent, and one of the benefits you have with something like an iPad Pro is that you've got a lot of grunt under the hood of that particular piece of technology. In fact, when they released the iPad Pro, the AutoCAD web app was one of the apps that was demonstrated by Apple on the iPad Pro, purely because it's got a fantastic interface for that. It interfaces beautifully with things like the Apple Pencil, and I will say that there are plenty of other styli out there that you can use. You've also got things like the Microsoft Surface Pro as well, which follows a very similar workflow to the iPad Pro from Apple as well. But the technology is fantastic, and the benefits you have there is something like an iPad Pro is so much more portable than, say, a big heavy desktop machine. Saying that, I do trek around with a MacBook all the time, and that runs all my desktop apps. But sometimes you just don't want to sit there and have to wait for Windows to boot up and then find your drawing and so on. It's so much quicker just to type web.autocad.com in a browser, use your AutoCAD account to Autodesk account to log in, and go and find those drawings in the cloud that you've uploaded already before that meeting that you've just walked into with your iPad Pro.
Great, thank you, Sean. We had one, I think, final question, and that was about your favorite app in the App Store.
As I said, it was the one on the slide. When I'm 3D modeling, one of the things that you utilize in 3D modeling, they're called dumb solids or AutoCAD solids because they have no functionality. And you can use things like Boolean algebra, which is things like union, intersect, and so on and subtract. But there's a fantastic little app in there called Trim Split. And what it allows you to do is it allows you to trim and split a protrusion from a 3D object away from the main object. So if you had, for example, a circular sort of base cylinder in 3D and it had objects coming off of it, you can trim and split those objects off of the cylinder. So you might have some nuts and bolts that have been modeled onto the cylinder, but they're part of that solid and you want to take them off. So Trim Split, it trims the nuts and bolts off the cylinder and then splits them away from the solid. And it's such a simple little app, but it just works, and it's one of my favorites.
Terrific. Thank you, Sean. We really appreciate you sharing today about AutoCAD versus AutoCAD LT. I think that's all the time we have for today for questions. So thank you everyone for joining us. This will be sent out as a recording after. So I'm gonna hang up now. Thanks everybody.
Thanks, Kayla.
Bye.
Bye now.